Okay, I have updated the Common Errors paper that has been available to you for some time, but I've updated it in light of your papers, and so I've highlighted a few things, added some things, and given some examples on a few issues. Most of you did pretty good on the APA formatting. Great job. I didn't have too many issues with that. Just make sure that you do get all the pieces there. And the abstracts were pretty good. So there are things that you all did great as a class. Make sure you don't forget your title on the third page of the document above the essay. If you use headings, you center them and bold them, but your title is not bolded. So that's weird. APA is a little strange, I know, and it's not exactly intuitive. You have to make sure that you study up on this stuff. Most of you did fine on the audience. I think I highlighted one, your, while you are. Great job. Not too bad at all on the audience. And then, of course, continuing with APA formatting, we need to focus on the references page. So I despise the Word template where you go and put APA and you type in your information. You need to be citing based on your own understanding of APA formatting from our textbook. And when you have an issue that you can't find in our textbook, then you can Google it or go to Al Purdue. Anyway, one of the things that is kind of common across some of your papers is that you are capitalizing the titles in the references the way we think of capitalization, and APA has some bizarre rules about capitalizing titles of articles. So if you are someone who has done this, I did note it, but I wanted just to point it out. So I'm borrowing a few examples from student papers here. So this is what the example looked like. And I just said, review APA capitalization rules. So the rule is that only first words and proper nouns are capitalized in article titles. And so in this title here, you're only going to capitalize number and Americans. Okay, so I know that's strange, but make sure that you all are checking on that. Paper must have a thesis. Most of you do have a thesis. That's really obvious. Even though you're Comp 2, and you are more than welcome to put your thesis in different places, really the best place is that last sentence of the introduction paragraph, because you don't want your reader guessing at what your point is. And I'm going to make that point later as well. And then make sure that you're proving your thesis with your evidence. Some of you do have some issues with organization, and I've noted that. Your paragraphs need to be focused, and the order that you put your paragraphs in need to make sense to the overall theme of the paper. This one was not common. There are no extra spaces between paragraphs. You all did great on not doing that. If you do have headings, don't start them at the bottom. Okay, so those are just some basic stuff from years past. Okay, here's one thing that did come up. So if you don't have an author and you have an article title, you shorten the title when you put it into parentheses, but you also have to put quotation marks around it. So here's our example. Lethal injection was the beginning of the source, and it's right here. Lethal injection is not humane. So you can see that the student did well in shortening it, but it has to have quotation marks, and the comma goes inside quotation marks. Okay. All right. So now we're going to kind of get into the nitty-gritty stuff. This next bullet point says use your own words as much as possible. You cannot have entire paragraphs that include only quoted material. There were some of you that used a few too many quotes, but you know what? For the most part, you did well on this part. You cannot have whole paragraphs with no source material. So it's a balancing act. And so when I say your own words, it doesn't mean your own ideas. I know that's weird. It means paraphrasing. So you need to strive for paraphrasing source material, and then that will balance out using source material and using your own words. But you still cite when you paraphrase. You always cite any source information. Consider your paragraph construction. Every paragraph should start with a general topic sentence. And again, don't make your audience wonder what the point of that paragraph is. And you want to keep your paragraphs focused. I have commented on some of yours that you need to look at your paragraphing again and make sure that you're focused on one sentence or one point, I mean. And I don't think I put it here. Listen to this, guys. Here we go. Paragraphs should only be a half page in length. So if they are longer than this, see where you can break them apart. And so here's the deal. You can carry 1 point on for several paragraphs, because what happens is that you are maybe slightly changing the focus a little bit. But you don't want huge long paragraphs because your reader won't read them. I mean, they just stop reading and it gets confusing. So try to make your paragraphs no more than a half page in length. See where you can break them apart. Keep them focused. Do not drop in quotes. Set up your quotes. Use signal phrases, colons, whatever you have to do to set up your quotes. When you do set up a quote and you use the author's name, put the date immediately after the author. And then if you have page numbers or paragraph numbers, they can go in parentheses. It's the most thorough way of citing. Study your text. Here's the thing. Don't double cite. If you've mentioned the author and you're in the sentence and there are no page numbers, you're done citing. Okay? And if your quote is 40 words or more, you must set it off by itself. So I've given you some page numbers here, and I'm going to show you an example at the bottom of this document. When you introduce an author for the first time, include the first name if at all possible, but do not repeat the first name later on in the paper. No need to whatsoever. The only time you might do that is if you come back with a quote from an author in the conclusion. Then you may introduce the first name again, but that's the only time. Some of you are really like your article titles. If the article title is really great for your point, and also if you're using a lot of information from that article, yeah, go ahead and put article titles in the essay. But make sure that they don't hamper the flow of your paper. And if you do use them, you're going to capitalize them as you normally would using standard writing rules. And I'll show you in the little excerpt how to do that. This was, if you have no author, use shortened version. We've already covered that. Okay, so there are some confusions about when to cite, especially when you're paraphrasing. Always cite your source the very first time you use the source information. So let's say you have 5 sentences that all the information comes from the same source. Cite it on the first sentence, and then I also recommend coming back and citing again before you leave that source information, just to make it clear for your reader. If you are quoting a quote, as I say, make sure you do it properly, as cited, page 456. Make sure your evidence definitely supports your thesis and that it's convincing. And then here's a couple of miscellaneous, a lot of you are fans of. The author goes on to say, just use verbs like explains or explain, depending on your tense. Here's the thing. This indicates that it indicates placement in the article. And your reader doesn't have that article in front of them. And so the reader is not cognizant of where in the article this information occurs. It is just best to say the author explains. Also, some of you are creating fragments by using reason being or starting a sentence with meaning. Make sure it's grammatical. The reason is, or this means. All right, so I borrowed a paragraph from Willis's paper, and there's some comments here. So a couple things that I noted. Here we have a comma splice. So any of you that have highlights in areas like this, look to see if it's a comma splice. In this particular quote here, he has, it wasn't exactly grammatical as written. Starts okay with Krantz in the 2016. Okay, here's the article title, and it just gets a little, when article titles are not capitalized properly, it makes it hard to read. So that's one thing I noted. Also, when we have a long quote, so this quote is 55 words, and so it's too long to be within the sentence, so it needs to be set apart. Okay. Also here, when I say don't double quote, introduce the author here, give the date, do not repeat it here. Okay, so here's the corrected version, and you can take a look at that. I'm going to be providing this document to you. And this is how we set it off. And then notice that the student came back and wrapped this up, or will when he finishes it, okay? Also notice that we have paraphrasing here. Fernando Duarte, 2019, of the BBC claims that by January 4, a CEO in Britain, none of that is quoted. And so he's paraphrasing, but he's still giving credit to the author. Okay, so take a look at these little common errors. Look over my feedback to you. Look at your peers' review tomorrow when I open them up. And spend the next 3 or 4 days polishing up your paper. Thanks a lot.